Hello team. We created a RESTful service. We did an overview of tools for the API testing and we installed Postman. This all we did in previous lessons. And now it is time to learn how we can test our API. This is going to be a lesson full of practical examples. So we'll start lesson directly from the screen sharing. I'm going to make an overview of Postman interface and main UI elements that you are going to interact with. Also, I'm going to share with you a collection of requests and I will show you how you can import those in your Postman in order to repeat after me all my queries. I will show how to export existing collections or how to create new collections. I'm going to show you how you can send requests with different methods. We'll read responses. We're going to learn how to work with responses and how to analyze them. Also, we'll learn how to send and read custom headers. We'll perform testing of our RESTful service that we created in previous lesson. So, we'll test all endpoints that we created. We'll test create, read, update, delete operations with the resource using our REST API. Also, I'm going to explain you the difference between form data and form URL encoded. Let's start our lesson. And from this point, we can jump to the live demo, and I will proceed with the screen sharing. So, here you can see interface of the Postman. Let me make a high-level overview of the key UI elements here, and after that we'll dive deeper in details of each section by using it. As you may already see, the Postman desktop version has a clean and user-friendly interface that is divided into several sections. The main sections of the interface include Sidebar. The sidebar is located on the left-hand side of the screen and provides access to all the features and functions in Postman. It includes tabs for collections, APIs, environments, mock servers, monitors, and history. Request Builder. The Request Builder is located in the center of the screen and allows you to create and send requests to APIs. It includes fields for the request method, URL, parameters, headers, and body. Also, in case endpoint requires authorization, you can configure it here too. You can capture cookies. Code pane. Here on the right, you can find a really useful tool. It is called Code Snippet. Basically, you can generate the code to execute required query. No matter whether you want to use CURL request or C# or Java. Just use this drop-down list to select what you need. Later, you can use this code in your program in order to execute the queries that you need. Response pane. The response pane is located to the bottom of the request builder and displays the response data returned by the API. It includes tabs for the response body, headers, and cookies. That's the place where we'll observe what server responded us. Test and console panes. The test and console panes are located at the bottom of the screen and allow you to write and run tests for your API requests. The console pane displays log messages and errors generated by Postman. Top bar. The top bar is located at the very top of the screen and includes the workspace management. Also, you can create an account if you want to personalize your experience or use Postman without account. It is up to you. Also, you can use search bar and settings. Overall, the Postman interface is designed to be intuitive and user-friendly, with key UI elements organized in a logical and easy-to-use manner. So, it is time to start using Postman. For the sake of the demo, I started the web server and deployed the REST APIs that we developed together in the previous lesson to interact with user resource and more demo endpoints. Make sure that your server is running. and now I'm going to execute queries imitating the development process. Usually, during the development, you design an endpoint, implement it, and then you want to test how it works. You just open the Postman and send some queries, and explore what is returned. So now, when we know the interface, we can start working with Postman. In the previous lesson, we created our REST API, and now let's learn Postman better by actually working with it. I will just imitate the regular flow that I would do as a developer or QA when I was supposed to test endpoints. Today I'm going to show you how to create your own collections of requests. But before we start, I want to say that in attachments to this lesson you are going to find the reference to the export of collections. Basically, you can click import here and import my collections that I have shared in the attachments to this lesson. You just need drag and drop my export file into the area inside your Postman. Taking into account I already have such collection, I would import it as a copy. And after importing, you are going to have the same list of requests that I am going to review with you today. Or you can just follow my examples and create your own collection, as you wish. In case you want to export your collection, you can just find 3 dots here and click export. That's it. Let's send our first request. Everything is simple here. You just paste the URL into query pane. Where I take this URL? Well, I deployed my web application. It is available at localhost at default port 8080. Our deployed application is called Spring Web. And then goes name of my endpoint. Let me open the source code. Here it is. Users. Let's get back to the Postman. Now we need to check which request method we are going to use to reach the resource. By default, it is get method here, but you can use drop down to select the method that you need. I'm ready to send the request. I click send button. And here's the response. Let's explore it together. This endpoint should return a collection of users. You can see 200 OK status code, time of response, size of the response. Here you can also use navigation pane to explore either body or cookies or headers. In this case, there are no cookies, but there are some headers. You can explore the response in the pretty or raw format. Usually it is hard to work with raw format because it is not readable. With pretty format you can collapse and expand the elements of the response. The format of the response is auto-detected, but in case you need to change the format of the response, you can use this drop-down. So, in the response, you can see that I have multiple users here. What you also would like to do usually is to store the request in order to not create the same request each time from scratch. So, let's click Save button. But taking into account that this request is already saved in my Postman, let's use Save As option. Specify meaningful name for the query in order you can easily understand what it is about. You can also add the description to the query if you want to be able to recall what it is about later. Each request should be a part of some collection. You can see that I have collections here created already. You can create a new collection by clicking New Collection button, or just select one of the existing collections in order to save the query. Inside the collection, you can create folders in case you want to group your queries in another way. Also, you can navigate between collections and folders using these breadcrumbs. Taking into account I have this query saved already, I would just click Cancel button. But you can click Save button. All your collections you can find in the left pane, Collections. Here are they. Just double-click on the request and you will open it. The next request is to fetch user by ID. Using the endpoints that we created in previous lesson, I specify users endpoint and user ID. Send request, and here is my user with ID 7. Everything works as expected. I will not stop too much on this request because it is pretty straightforward. Even in case you have any questions, remember that you can ask your questions below the video and I will be happy to answer those. Let's continue. The next request is with request parameter. This time we wanna filter users by the first name, and we learned that it is a good practice to use request parameters for filtering and sorting. In this case, I specify first name request parameter that is equal to admin, and in the response I have multiple users who have first name admin. Feel free to use query params section in order to add, enable, or disable some query parameters, and it will help you to build the query. The main thing is to specify key and value, but optionally for the documenting purposes you can specify description too. The next request is similar to the one that we have reviewed. We use sort by query parameter to sort results by first name field. You can notice that users in our response will be sorted by first name values. The next thing is to demo post request. We created request parameters demo endpoint. Let me show it to you in the source code. Just to remind you, this is the endpoint that can be accessed via post method, and request param still means not something what is sent in body of the request, but something what is specified in the query as a parameter. So, in this case, when I send a request and pass one parameter, it is taken into account on the server side, and according to the logic that we created, we return it back in the response. Is it clear? Amazing! We also created an endpoint that parses all request parameters into the map. You can pass multiple parameters, and in Java source code you can work with all of them as with the map. And here is how this endpoint works. I send request, and I return entry set of parameters. In case you wanna pass information in the request body, similar to the way how we transmit this data with the help of HTML forms, you can do it too. Let's navigate to the Body tab. Specify the data type that you wanna send as form data. Select either form data or form URL encoded. What is the difference between these? The main difference between the two is in how the data is formatted and sent. Form data is used to send binary data such as images or files as well as text data. It is commonly used when uploading files or submitting forms with file inputs. In form data, each key-value pair is separated by a boundary string and is sent in a separate section, which makes it more suitable for sending large files. X3W form URL encoded, on the other hand, is used to send simple text data in the format of key-value pairs, separated by an ampersand symbol. It is commonly used when submitting form data without file inputs. In form URL encoded, the data is encoded and sent as a single string in the request body. In summary, if you need to send binary data or large files, use form data. If you are sending simple text data, use X3W form URL encoded. So in this case, I select form URL encoded and send the request. In response, we can see form data from the request body. And just to remind you that on the backend side we need to specify that this endpoint consumes specific media type. In the source code you can see that I specified that this endpoint consumes application form URL encoded. That's how it works. Also, I wanted to show you that theoretically you can pass list of parameters, comma-separated values, like you can see in this example. You can send multiple IDs at once, putting them in one request parameter that is called IDs. On the backend side, they are parsed into the list of values. I just print the list of values into the response. Nothing special, but you can build your business logic around the list of values as you wish. The next thing that I would like to show you is how you can test that custom response status is returned. Just to remind you that on the backend, for one of our endpoints, we configured IMT port response status. And when I send request to this endpoint in the Postman, I can see that response status code is 418. You can see status code here. This is achieved by using response status annotation in the source code. Another interesting thing about Postman, you can see that server generated HTML page for us. You can use preview mode in order to preview page markup. Also here you can see the reason that we also specified in the response status annotation. Demo endpoint reason. Now let's delete the resource using REST API. If you remember, we have test user John Doe with ID 12. Let's remove it. I specify user ID that I want to delete and send request via delete method. Pay attention that no content string has been returned. Why? Because I used HTTP status as a returned value, and it was casted to string value. The actual status of the response is 200 OK. Why I show you this? Just to highlight that in case you want to control response status, setting up the returned value is not enough. You need to use response status annotation to configure custom response status. And this time, in case we would request user's resource, we are going to see that there is no John Doe user object anymore. Thus, we can be sure that endpoint works as expected. Let's now create the resource. Usually we create resources with the post method. In our REST service, we have users endpoint that create resource in case resource is reached via post method. In this case, we need to open body tab, select a raw form of data, and insert the JSON of your user resource. You can see here that I pass key value path that reflects the state of the user object. And I just click Send Request button. That's it. Resource is created. Let's now call all users to make sure that the new user is created. And in the bottom, we can see that new user with fake data was created. Amazing. Let's imagine now that we want to update resource. Usually we update resource via put method. So in the next example, I also send JSON in the body of the request. But I want to update an email. I want to change email in order it would have test email domain. Let me send the request. Web server accepted my request. Let's check all users again. And you can see that email value right now ends up not with email.com, but with testemail.com. And pay attention that in real life, in case you have applications that consist from multiple services, the services can exchange the data and communicate in the similar way. We just use Postman as a client now, but in real life this can be any other application generating requests and acting as a client of our application. The next thing that I wanted you to demo is how to return object of response entity type. You can remember that in previous lesson when we created our RESTful service, I showed you that you can return response entity in order to configure response status, response headers, and response body in one object. In this particular example, you can see that after I sent request, I receive custom response body and custom response header. Let me show it to you on the headers tab.
Here you can see custom header and fake data.
Also, if you wish, you can configure custom status code. The next example is to demo and check request header annotation. I can specify custom headers and submit them to the REST API. On the Headers tab, you can see headers that are added by default here, and additional custom header. For example, in case I want to send accept language header, I just add it here and specify value for it. And as usual, you're welcome to leave any description in case it would help us in documenting the request. When I send the request, my endpoint passes request header and I return header value in response. Everything works as expected. Let's move on. In the next example, I demonstrate endpoints that parses all the headers into the map. And in the source code, you can work with the map of key-value pairs that represent headers. In this particular case, I just send them back in the response. That's it. We tested all our endpoints. I hope that this lesson was useful for you and it will help you during the daily activities. Let's recap what we have learned in the lesson. Today we learned Postman user interface and key UI elements. I showed you how we can work with collections, how to import-export collections, and how to create new collections of requests. You saw how to work with requests and responses. During the lesson, we sent requests with different HTTP methods. Also, you saw how to read responses. We worked with custom headers by sending them and receiving custom headers. We tested our RESTful service and all its endpoints. Also, you learned how to execute create, read, update, and delete operations with resource. And at the end of the lesson, we learned the difference between form data and X3W form URL encoded. That's all for this lesson. Thanks a lot for your attention. Have a great day and see you in the next lesson.